Michael Dirocco, ESPN reporter who covers the Jacksonville Jags. That's his main beat, and we will get to that. But we all know how no matter what company you work for today, they stretch the envelope. They make you do other things. And the other thing that Michael Dirocco did over the weekend was cover the Sandy Alderson press conference when he said some crazy things about Tim Tebow that would lead us to believe that really Alderson believes that Tim Tebow will end up playing in the major someday. Michael Dirocco, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you today?
Good, Michael. Appreciate a few minutes. So start with Alderson. It's that live, local, late-breaking, regional stuff of interest here in the Capital Region. What was your take, and tell us what you wrote about regarding the press conference with Mets GM Sandy Alderson when he said that he thought Tim Tebow would someday play in the majors? Well,
I'll be honest. I don't really follow Major League Baseball as closely as, obviously a lot of you guys do and listeners do. So I needed to take a minute after that press conference because I thought that seemed to be, when he said he thought he would play in the majors, that seemed to be the most definitive he had been about Tebow's future. So I needed to take a couple of minutes to talk to some guys and make sure that I wasn't missing something. And I was, a little bit surprised. I mean, the guy played one season and hadn't played for 12 years. And I was just a little bit surprised that he was that definitive, that he felt like Tebow's athleticism and his commitment and his work ethic and the improvements that he made over the offseason would be enough eventually to get him up to the big. So it was a little bit of a surprise for me, and certainly some of the media that cover the Mets regularly down there were a little surprised as well, obviously.
And Michael, you were there. He said this with a straight face, right? There wasn't like I mean, did anybody ask a follow-up question once he said this?
That was like the last press question of the press conference. Actually, something else, the follow-up question was asked about, hey, do you take in the information about the fan attendance and all that kind of stuff, and in terms of where Tebow's going to be this year and how important is that kind of stuff. So it was at the end of the press conference, unfortunately. But the thing that I took about it is he seems to be pretty consistent in the fact that he said, hey, this is not just a gimmick. We wouldn't have signed him if we didn't think that there was some potential there. And he said, look, we need to remember this is entertainment, and Tebow entertains us. And he's kind of said that stuff before, so he's pretty consistent there from that standpoint. And, as somebody that covered Tebow years ago, I used to cover the University of Florida for the newspaper here in Jacksonville before I moved to ESPN, and I was covering the Gators during Tebow's tenure, so I know kind of firsthand the Tebow impact. And, Alderson has been pretty consistent about this is not a gimmick. This is something that they believe, he's got a chance maybe to be a solid professional baseball player.
Michael Dirocco with us here on Big Board Sports, ESPN Radio 104.5, The Team, and you can find Michael on Twitter at ESPN Dirocco, Dirocco. Michael, take us back to those Gators days. I guess when you were covering Tebow, what type of person, athlete is he from what you experienced that at least gives you some hope that maybe he is the type of person who could play in the major leagues?
Yeah, it's sort of like what I thought about when he went into the NFL. There were always questions about, what kind of quarterback he could be. Is he able to read the defenses? Will he be able to make the decisions? Will he be able to throw the ball in the smaller windows? That kind of stuff. And it didn't work out for him, but it wasn't because of a lack of work and trying and commitment. And that's kind of the way it is with baseball. I don't know if it's going to work, but he's, the same guy in terms of 100% committed. He's going to do whatever it takes to get better. He wants to get better. He wants to work at it. He's going to give it as much effort and squeeze every last ounce of ability that he's got, to try and get this done. And that's been consistent with him since the moment he stepped on the UF campus, back in 2000 and, it was actually, January 2006. And he was a big part of that 06 national championship team, even though he wasn't the starting quarterback. So he's been pretty consistent since then. So I don't see any reason for him to have changed. And, I talked with him a little bit in the clubhouse before the press conference, and seems like the same guy, just, about 12 years older than the first time I met him.
Yeah, hey, good guy, great athlete. I just don't see it happening, but Sandy Alderson said it, and that's why it has become a headline and a story. Hey, before we let you go, Jacksonville is your beat. I know the NFL season is over. You got a little bit of a break, not much of one. What's going to happen to Blake Bortles?
I think the Jags are going after Kirk Cousins. I think that's going to be their play, and they would be foolish not to examine that seriously to see if that's a possibility, because he would be an upgrade over Bortles. And if they're able to land Kirk Cousins, I think they're a definite Super Bowl contender next year. If they're unable to get Cousins, then I still think they stick with Bortles. They draft another quarterback, and I still think they're one of the better teams in the AFC. They probably have just as good a chance of getting the Super Bowl next year as they did this year. I think that would be better with Cousins, but I just there's so many variables for the Cousins decision. He may not want to play here in Florida. He may not want to play for the Jaguars. He may want to play for John Elway in Denver. The Browns can throw way more money at him, and the Jets are legitimate candidates as well. I mean, it's one thing playing in Jacksonville. It's another thing playing in New York, the biggest media market ever. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops, because it's going to be relatively quickly over the next 2 or 3 weeks when we figure this out.
Yeah, I figure 3 weeks, March the 12th. That's when it happens.
I love the idea, Michael, of like Todd Bowles, Tom Coughlin, John Elway showing up on Cousins' front lawn midnight of whatever, March 13th or whatever it would be, right?
Well, in that case, just knowing Coughlin may scare the hell out of him. I mean, who knows? But you know what? If you're going to listen to a couple of guys that know football, certainly Coughlin and Elway are two guys that would carry a lot of weight. Absolutely.
Well, the Jets are going to be players because they get the most money. What kind of money does Jacksonville have? Can they come close to what the Jets would be offering?
Yeah, I mean, this number is going to be somewhere between 27 and 30 million a year. And the Jags, they can afford that. I did a story on that before. Now, they will have to release, obviously, a couple of guys. Bortles being off the books at 19 million next year obviously helps that significantly. But there's a couple like Chris Ivory, the former Jet running back. They could release him and save some money. Alan Hearns, one of the receivers here, is due $7 million. He's not a $7 million receiver, so they can save some money there, and some other veteran cuts and such. So they could afford him. Now, they can't throw the kind of money at him that, if the Jets or the Browns want to go $32 million a year, at some point it becomes too rich for the Jags' blood, and we'll see how that happens. But they can afford him for sure. Their window to win the Super Bowl isn't, very big. It's maybe next year, the year after. You can't keep an elite defense like this together forever. You've got some significant guys that you have to sign to some extensions there with Jalen Ramsey. It's going to be a mega deal, Unique Ngakoue, and guys leave and guys get older. So, it's really a 2, maybe 3-year window. So that's why I feel like if they can get Cousins, then they should be one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl.
And then it becomes where does Kirk Cousins want to play? And it sounds like Jacksonville, maybe of all the teams that we just mentioned, we've been on this topic throughout the course of the show this morning, Michael, go to a team that gives him the best chance to win. It may very well be of all the teams, Denver, Cleveland, Jets, it's Minnesota, although I think they're probably the least of the teams. Jacksonville might be his best choice.
Yeah, I mean, if truly he wants to go to a team that's close to winning the Super Bowl and he can be the difference maker, then out of that group, with the possible exception of Minnesota. But like you, I do think that their cap situation, I believe, isn't as fluid as the Jaguars or the rest of them. But of those teams, I think if you really want to be a guy that can put your team over the edge to win a Super Bowl or at least get there, I think the Jags are probably in the best shape, which is something I never thought I'd say at this time last year.
Well,
that Coughlin effect, right,
yeah,
Raj? That's your guy, man.
We love Coughlin up here. I hope it all goes well for TC. I am a big fan of Tom Coughlin. I know what a great job he has done in a short period of time coming back to Jacksonville.
Yeah, and he does deserve a ton of the credit, but I also want to make, whenever I talk to people about this, I'm like, hey, look, Doug Marrone deserves some of this credit too, and Dave Caldwell, excuse me, who really put the bulk of this roster together, and he's the guy who drafted Ramsey and Telvin Smith and Unique Ngakoue and Miles Jack, and he's the one who got the signing class done last year. Calais Campbell and A.J. Boye, Barry Church. So it's really been a three-headed monster. But with Coughlin in charge and the top of that pyramid, it's worked well better than anyone would have thought, including Shad Khan, the owner, who decided to give Coughlin the full football control.
Michael Dirocco, thanks so much for wearing a couple different hats for us here this morning on the covering of the Tim Tebow, and then great stuff on Jacksonville wanting to be a big player. We did not have that team in our mix here this morning, and now we do thanks to you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. That's good stuff.